I watched doctors rush to save my 5-week-old son. Blood covered his tiny face, soaking through the soft blue blanket in my arms. His skull had been struck, shattered, by a medieval Morgenstern. The attacker? Our HOA president, Karen. She said my baby's cries were disturbing the neighborhood. She said she'd teach us a lesson. She had no idea who she was dealing with, no idea what the father of the child she attacked was the police chief. And when justice came for her, it didn't come with a warrant. It came with me. Before you hear how it all happened, comment below where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more real HOA stories that show what happens when power goes too far. Karen always walked like the sidewalk belonged to her, clipboard tight to her chest, chin lifted, shoes clicking in perfect rhythm with her sense of superiority. Every step she took on that street was a reminder to the world that she believed she ruled it. Our neighborhood wasn't a community to her. It was a territory, a kingdom. And she was the self-appointed queen. When we first moved in, my wife held our 5-week-old son in her arms like he was made of light. We came here for peace, a quiet suburban life away from the endless sirens and chaos of the city. A small house, a small yard, soft grass, gentle mornings. For the first few days it felt like heaven. Then Karen arrived, binder of HOA rules in hand, fake smile stretched like glass ready to crack. "Congratulations on your little one," she said, voice sweet in the way poison can be sweet. "Just remember we have community noise standards. Everyone values peace here." We thanked her politely. My wife adjusted the baby's blanket nervously. We thought she meant parties, loud music, things reasonable. But Karen's eyes weren't on parties. They were on the baby, his tiny chest rising and falling, his soft cooing like it was a personal offense to her perfect world. At first it seemed harmless. 2 notes left on our door. Crying past quiet hours. Disturbance complaint. My wife cried harder than the baby when she found them. She was exhausted, healing, barely sleeping. I soothed her, told her it was nothing, just a difficult woman with too much time and too little kindness. I kissed her forehead and promised her peace. Karen escalated. She marched to our door one afternoon while my wife was rocking the baby. I opened the door before she could knock. She didn't smile this time. "It has gotten unacceptable," she said, voice tight, sharp like she was trying not to scream. "Residents have rights to tranquility. Babies should not disrupt a neighborhood. If you cannot control him, perhaps this community isn't suitable for you." My jaw clenched. "He's 5 weeks old," I replied, slow, steady. "He isn't a nuisance. He's a human being." Karen's eyes narrowed into slits. "Rules don't bend simply because you reproduced." She leaned forward as if she was giving me a secret. "Control your home, or someone else will." Then she walked away, heels stabbing the pavement like they were punishing it. Neighbors peeked from windows, faces disappearing as fast as they appeared. They knew her. They feared her. She'd find them for lawn heights, mailbox colors, Christmas decorations that didn't match the community theme. She chased a teenager off the sidewalk once for laughing too loudly. She filed a report about a man's wind chimes. When she said she wanted silence, she meant it like it was law. That night, my wife whispered she was scared. I told her she didn't have to be. I didn't tell her why. I didn't tell her about the badge in my drawer or the uniform hanging in my closet. I didn't tell her I spent years training to face threats much sharper than Karen's tongue. The next morning, the air was crisp and too quiet. My wife sat on the porch, rocking the baby in the sunshine. Birds chirped, leaves rustled. Then footsteps, sharp, impatient. Karen was back, no clipboard this time. Just anger. Something metal glimmered inside her bag, but I didn't see it yet. Her voice cut through the calm like a blade. "I warned you," she snapped. "Your baby cried again. The neighborhood heard it. Do you think rules are a joke? Do you think you are above everyone here?" My wife stood slowly, clutching the baby close. "Please," she pleaded softly, tired and fragile. "He's just a baby." Karen's face twisted. "Noise is noise. Disruption is disruption. I will not let this neighborhood fall apart because you decided to reproduce without thinking about consequences." I stepped outside then, every nerve in my body locked. "Walk away," I said, voice level, cold as stone. Not yelling, just stating a fact the universe was about to enforce. Now, Karen didn't walk away. She took a step forward instead, eyes blazing. Her hand entered her bag and rested on something heavy. She didn't pull it out, but she wanted to. I saw the calculation, the anger, the unhinged righteousness. "You don't scare me," she hissed. "This place has rules. You don't belong here." I stepped between her and my family. My voice dropped lower. "You have no idea who you're talking to." And right then, I saw fear touch her face for the first time. Not understanding yet, but knowing instinctively she had stepped into a place she shouldn't have. She turned sharply and stormed away, muttering threats, promising action, swearing we would pay. My wife asked if she'd come back. I looked at our child, breathing softly, safe for now, and felt something old and dangerous rise inside me. "She already crossed the line," I whispered, "and she has no idea what comes next." Karen didn't leave. She hovered at the edge of our porch like a storm deciding where to strike, knuckles white around the leather strap of that bag she refused to let go of. My wife clutched our son tighter, his tiny head resting under her chin, heartbeat trembling against her skin. I saw my wife's fear, and it carved something deep inside me. Karen pointed at the baby like he was evidence in a case she was determined to win. "That child has screamed every day since you moved here," she snapped. "This neighborhood has rules, peace, order. You don't get to ruin it because you don't know how to parent." My jaw tightened. I stepped down one stair toward her, slow, deliberate. "He's 5 weeks old. Babies cry. That's life." "Not here it isn't," she fired back, voice rising, house windows flickering with silhouettes of neighbors who pretended they weren't watching. "I told you to control the noise. If you can't, then you shouldn't live here. Control the noise." The way she said it made my stomach turn. My wife tried to retreat inside, but Karen blocked the doorway, not touching her, just invading the space like she owned oxygen itself. "Don't walk away when I'm addressing you," she hissed. I moved between them, the distance closing in seconds. "Step back." Her face twitched. That same unhinged righteousness from earlier returned. "People like you think rules don't apply to you, think you can move into a refined community and turn it into chaos." "People like us?" I repeated slowly. The silence after those words stretched tight. She didn't blink. Parents who can't control their child, families who ignore standards, disturbances. She reduced an infant's existence to a code violation, and in her warped mind, that justified any response she felt entitled to. She raised her chin. "Last warning. Get your noise problem under control. I don't care how." She looked right at my baby when she said it. That was the moment something in my heartbeat changed. I'd seen danger before, on streets, in alleys, in the eyes of violent people who believed the world owed them obedience. Karen had that same fire, just dressed in HOA paperwork and suburban perfume. "Leave," I repeated, voice lower now. Not anger, something colder. She finally backed up, but not like someone retreating, like someone preparing. "Fine. If you won't discipline your household, the association will intervene." "Intervene?" My wife whispered, clutch tightening around our son. Karen smiled. Thin, chilling. "We have the right to enforce community standards. You'll learn that soon." She turned and walked off the porch, heels striking hard like punctuation marks. Halfway down the path, she paused and glanced back. "Enjoy your evening. It may be one of your last peaceful ones here." She left. Lawn sprinklers hissing in the distance, the street buzzing not with insects but with judgment. Curtains twitched shut. Phones lowered. The neighborhood pretended neutrality while silently feeding her power. My wife sank onto the porch bench, tears finally spilling. She hates us. She hates our baby. What is wrong with her? I knelt in front of her, hand on her knee. "Nothing's wrong with us," I said softly. "There's something wrong with her." But in my mind, gears were already turning. I'd seen escalation patterns. I'd seen people justify harm under the disguise of authority. I'd seen order weaponized more dangerously than any blade. This wasn't HOA drama anymore. This was obsession, entitlement, delusion dressed as leadership. I checked the front camera feed. Karen stood across the street pretending to inspect a neighbor's mailbox while staring at our house like it offended her existence. When her gaze finally shifted, it wasn't relief. It was anticipation. She wasn't done. She was just beginning. Inside, I laid my son in his bassinet and kissed his head. His breath was soft, peaceful, unaware of ugliness outside these walls. My wife locked every window, double-checked the doors. I stood in the hallway, my badge suddenly heavier in my pocket. I became a father to protect. I became an officer to serve. I became chief to ensure justice. Tonight, I needed all three. Because Karen wasn't going to stop. People like her never do until someone draws a line they cannot cross. And she had no idea she just crossed mine. I sat in the living room until midnight, lights off, watching the street through the blinds. Karen's porch light flicked on and off repeatedly, like a signal, like she waited for a challenge. The house was quiet except for my son's breathing and the soft hum of the baby monitor. Peace, fragile, pale, breakable. I whispered, more to myself than anyone, you threatened the wrong family. And beneath that calm sentence, a promise formed. Not rage, not revenge, justice, real justice. The kind that came long before HOA bylaws and would outlive every rule Karen ever clung to. She thought she had power. She thought silence meant submission. But I wasn't silent. I was waiting, watching, preparing. The next time she came to my door, she wouldn't find a tired father apologizing for a crying baby. She would meet the police chief, and she would learn the difference between authority and actual power. Karen did not stay gone for long. People like her never leave quietly. They simmer, they plot, they convince themselves righteousness is armor thick enough to excuse anything. That night, her porch light flicked again and again like a warning flare only she understood. Sleep came in fragments. My wife rested on the edge of exhaustion, one arm always curled protectively around our son even in dreams. I sat awake in the dark, watching our hallway like it was a tactical zone instead of a peaceful home. When dawn broke, the neighborhood looked washed clean, but peace is never about sunlight. It's about intention, and Karen had none left. Her footsteps approached before her voice. Heavy, determined, sharp breaths taken through flared nostrils, a predator convinced she's the hero. My wife was in the living room gently rocking the baby, humming something soft and fragile. I was halfway down the hall when the knock came, not a knock but a bang, a demand, a declaration, I am here and you will answer. Before I reached the door, Karen's voice sliced through it. Last chance. Open up. You're done ignoring the rules. I opened the door but did not invite her in. She stood with that leather bag again, swollen, heavy, as if she'd been gripping it all night. Her pupils were blown wide, adrenaline or pure obsession running through her like electricity searching for a wire. You forced this, she breathed. You don't listen. You don't respect this neighborhood. You brought chaos, noise, disorder. Her gaze flicked to my wife holding the baby. My wife instinctively held him tighter, stepping back. Karen's jaw clenched, teeth grinding. I kept my voice level. Leave now. She did not. Her hand slid inside the bag. Slow, deliberate, like she wanted me to see the decision forming in real time. She pulled, metal glinted, the Morgenstern. For a second, the world shrank to the length of that weapon and the space between her and my family. My wife gasped. The baby stirred in her arms, sensing tension the way infants do, by the way hearts beat around them. Karen's breathing hitched, not hesitation, but anticipation. She wasn't thinking, she wasn't feeling, she was committed to a delusion only she could see. This ends today, she whispered. She moved, but she did not swing at my child because I was already there. My hand gripped her wrist mid-movement, stopping the arc before it had shape. The weapon never came near my son. Her arm locked under my palm, her body shocked at the contact. She hadn't expected resistance. Tyrants rarely do. They expect surrender, flinching, fear. She got none. Put it down, I said, my voice quiet but carrying weight steel wishes it had. She tried to yank away. My grip didn't move. She tried again, weaker this time, confusion flooding her face when fear finally reached her. That fear wasn't of the weapon. It was of me, of the sudden realization she wasn't in control. You think I won't defend my neighborhood? She spat, voice shaking. You think you ever ran it? I answered. She snarled, but her eyes darted. Left, right, desperate for witnesses who would back her, validate her, tell her she was justified. Doors were cracked open. Curtains twitched. Phones lifted. The same neighbors she'd bullied into silence were now watching a kingdom collapse. My wife stepped back further into the hall, shielding the baby. I felt her fear behind me like wind before a storm. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. My priority was in my hands, and my patience was hanging by threads. Drop it, I repeated. Karen's fingers loosened, more from shock than obedience. The Morgenstern slipped, hit the porch wood with a heavy thud. The sound echoed, a death bell for her illusion of power. She looked at the weapon like it betrayed her, like it chose me. "You can't stop me," she whispered. But it came out like a question, not a threat. "I already did." Her breath hitched. Pride tried to hold her upright, but fear pulled her down. Her voice shrank. You're nobody. Just another resident." I reached slowly into my jacket, not fast, not threatening, controlled. I pulled out the badge. Silver. Authority earned, not demanded. Her eyes widened, and the color drained from her face like truth sucking out the last drops of denial. "I am the police chief," I said, voice steady as a verdict. "And you just attempted to harm a child." The words crashed into her like a wave hitting stone, hard enough to break something inside. You can't," she stuttered. "I can," I said, "and I will." She looked around wildly, hoping someone would defend her. No one did. The neighborhood she ruled through fear suddenly saw her clearly, not as a leader but as a danger. A person who believed control outranked humanity. Her knees trembled, her voice shrank to a whisper. I only wanted peace." "No," I replied. "You wanted control." And then came the final crack in her mind. The one where she understood that power built on intimidation collapses the moment someone stronger stands against it. She tried to take a step back, but her leg buckled. She caught herself on the railing, shaking. The weapon lay at her feet, useless now, a relic of a fantasy she'd built around herself, a queen dethroned by her own madness. My wife whispered my name, voice tight with tears. I turned just enough to see our baby calm again, small hand curled around her shirt, safe. That sight grounded me more than any oath I'd ever sworn. I looked back at Karen, trembling, cornered by truth she couldn't escape. "You're finished," I said softly. Her eyes filled with panic, not rage this time. Panic of someone who finally sees the edge they were walking and realizes they have already stepped off. And the moment I reached for my phone to call it in, to make this official, permanent, irreversible, she ran, not gracefully, not defiantly. Like someone fleeing a battlefield they started and lost. She disappeared down the block, leaving behind her weapon, her power, and the thin shell of authority she once believed made her untouchable. I picked up the Morgenstern with a gloved hand, the metal still warm. My wife held our child like he was the world. And in that quiet aftermath, I knew this wasn't the end. People like Karen don't vanish. They regroup. They scramble. They try one last desperate act. But now the battlefield had a name. Justice. And she had no idea how to fight on that ground. Karen didn't disappear to calm down. People like her don't retreat to reflect. They retreat to reload. The moment she ran off our porch, my phone vibrated again and again with neighborhood alerts, group chats, camera notifications, whispered messages disguised as concern. Karen looked upset. "Everything okay?" Was she yelling again? I heard crying. "Do you need help?" But none of them stepped outside. Watching was safer than standing. I secured the iron weapon in my evidence bag and set it on the table. My wife sat with our baby pressed against her chest, rocking gently even though he was already asleep again. Her body moved on instinct. Comfort first, fear after. I touched her shoulder and felt the tremor still running through her. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything. Exhaustion, fear, the quiet disbelief of someone who expected suburbia to mean safety. "She won't stop," she whispered. "She's not done." I nodded once. She said she, but we both knew Karen was no longer just a neighbor. She had become a threat with a motive, a grudge, and a warped reason she believed justified anything. There was a knock at the door. 3 steady taps. Police code. I opened it to find 2 patrol officers I'd trained standing there, confusion etched into their posture. They saw the weapon bag, the baby monitor on the table, my wife holding our son as though the air might try to take him. "What happened here?" one asked, low voice, respectful but tense. "A neighbor crossed a line," I said, "a dangerous one." They exchanged a glance. They knew that tone. It wasn't the tone of a father panicking. It was the tone of a chief already calculating charges, paperwork, statements, consequences. I handed them the bag. "Preserve it. Handle chain of custody. No mistakes." They nodded, professionalism snapping into place like armor. "Yes, Chief." As they stepped back, radios crackled. Karen's voice, screaming, frantic, came through faintly from dispatch chatter. She wasn't hiding. She was trying to turn the system before it turned on her. Exactly the move of someone who lived off control. I closed the door and dialed command. Calm and clear, I issued instructions. Officers would canvass the street, collect security footage, speak to witnesses, request voluntary statements. No favoritism, no shortcuts. There were rules, to be followed correctly, not weaponized like she tried. My wife finally spoke. "Are we safe?" "Yes," I said. It wasn't a promise. It was a mission. Minutes later, a patrol cruiser parked at Karen's house. She burst out before the officers even reached her door. Voice shrill and trembling with misplaced righteousness. I could hear her from across the street. "He threatened me. He thinks he owns this place. He's dangerous." She pointed toward our home like a child blaming the teacher for catching her cheating. Her hands shook not from fear, but from indignation that the world wasn't automatically taking her side. The officers listened without reacting. They let her speak, let her rant about neighborhood standards, disruptive infants, refusal to comply with HOA authority. Not once did she mention the weapon. Not once did she mention crossing my threshold. Guilt never speaks with full sentences. It edits itself desperately. One officer finally asked, "Ma'am, where is the weapon?" Her face froze. She hadn't prepared for that question. He grabbed it," she pointed wildly. "He stole it. A lie delivered like truth always sounds thin." The officers didn't argue. They simply nodded and took notes with the quiet patience that terrifies guilty people more than shouting ever could. I watched this from inside, blinds tilted just enough to see. I didn't step outside. I didn't need to. Karen thought volume was power. I knew better. Power was documentation, truth, patience sharp enough to cut without moving. When the cruiser finally pulled away from her driveway, Karen stood on her lawn shaking, hugging herself not for warmth, but stability. No clipboard now, no superiority, just panic wrapped in the clothes of someone who realized the world no longer bent to her voice. Inside, my wife whispered, "Is she going to jail?" Eventually, I answered. "The law doesn't rush. It makes sure." Karen didn't sleep that night. Her lights stayed on, windows glowing like nervous eyes. She paced the sidewalk once, then again, trying to reclaim territory, trying to prove she still had control. Every step broadcast insecurity so loudly that even neighbors who once feared her now watched with pity or disgust. I stayed awake too, but not to stare her down. I sat at the kitchen table writing statements, filing documents, building the case the right way. Every word was a stone, every detail a nail. Justice doesn't sprint, it marches, and its footsteps echo longer. Near midnight, there was a soft tap. Not the urgent knock of anger, a gentle one. I opened the door to find an older neighbor couple standing there, hesitant but determined. "She's been like this for years," the man whispered. "People never spoke up." "She scared us," the woman admitted. "But after today, we want to give statements. We saw everything. Fear turning into courage, silence breaking into truth. The kind of shift that doesn't happen unless someone sees the consequences firsthand." "Thank you," I told them. They didn't do it because I asked. They did it because Karen went too far, even for them. By dawn, the neighborhood felt different, not safer yet, but awake. The dictatorship of one woman's ego had cracked, and through the cracks, accountability was starting to grow. I held my son in the morning light, his small breath steady, warm. My wife leaned against me, tired but slowly unwinding. Peace wasn't back yet, but it was coming. Step by step, paper by paper, truth by truth. And Karen? Next time she faced me, it wouldn't be doorstep defiance, it would be under oath. And she still had no idea how merciless fair justice can be. Morning sunlight spilled across the neighborhood like nothing had happened, but everyone knew something had changed, the kind of change you feel in your bones before you fully understand it. Curtains lifted slower, cars pulled out quieter, conversations were whispers, not greetings. Everyone watched Karen's house the way people watch a storm after the first lightning strike, waiting to see if it returns or dies. She didn't come out. Not for hours, not for anything. Fear sat inside her home like a heavy coat she couldn't take off. She wasn't the patrolling queen of the HOA anymore. She was a fugitive in her own cul-de-sac, pacing behind blinds, staring at driveways as if the concrete betrayed her. Then finally she emerged, not with confidence, with desperation. Her clothes were wrinkled, hair fraying, eyes glassy like she hadn't slept. She dragged her trash can to the curb not because it was trash day, but because she needed people to see her, needed to pretend life was still normal. A few neighbors stood outside, phones in hand, not for filming violence now, but for documenting justice if she tried anything again. Faces once afraid of her now watched her like a threat contained but not diffused. She saw me walking the stroller on the opposite sidewalk. My wife close beside me, our baby asleep, peaceful for the first time in days. A family doing something painfully ordinary, and for Karen, nothing could have been more infuriating. "You think you won," she spat across the street. I didn't answer. Peace was louder than her voice ever was. Her breathing shook. "This is harassment. You're stalking me. I could sue you." "You're in public," I replied calmly. "I'm walking my child. You set everyone against me," she snapped. "You're manipulating the whole neighborhood." "No," I said. "You did that by yourself." She trembled, fingers clenching the trash bin handle. Not anger now, panic. The panic of someone who realizes the empire they ruled was built on sand and fear, not loyalty. When fear evaporates, sand collapses. She pointed at me with a shaking hand. "This isn't over." "It soon will be," I answered. That's when the first police cruiser turned the corner, then another, then the unmarked car. Slow, professional, undeniable. Not emergency rush, procedural gravity. The kind that says paperwork is done, witnesses confirmed, statements matched, probable cause secured. Karen's face went white. She looked between the cars, between me, between the cameras watching from porches like silent jurors. "This is harassment," she screamed. "You all hate me because I keep order. I have authority here." One officer approached. Calm, respectful, firm. "Ma'am, we need to speak with you regarding an ongoing investigation." "No," she snapped. "I don't talk to subordinates. Bring your chief." I stepped forward. Not as father, not as neighbor, as the law she thought she understood and weaponized. "I'm right here." Silence hit the street like a dropped weight. Her lips trembled. You can't be serious. You attempted to harm a child," I said. "There are statements, evidence, video. This isn't personal, Karen, it's criminal." She backed away, shaking her head. "I didn't do anything wrong." He cried. "He disturbed the neighborhood. I enforced rules." "You enforced your ego," I answered, "not rules." Officers moved forward. She flinched. "Don't touch me. I am the HOA president. I have authority." One officer replied, voice like steel wrapped in courtesy, not over the law. Her knees weakened. The trash can wobbled and crashed sideways, spilling nothing, because emptiness mirrored her authority now. A sob broke out of her, raw and shocked. "I was protecting the community." "No," I said quietly. "You were punishing it." Her eyes darted around desperately, pleading for rescue from the same neighbors she once threatened over mailbox colors and grass height. None stepped forward. Not one. A few doors closed softly. Sympathy did not live here anymore. Only consequences. The officer recited her rights. She didn't scream at first. She stood frozen, stunned, as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Metal against skin, reality against delusion. Then her voice cracked. Please don't let them do this. I was just trying to keep things perfect." She wasn't talking me anymore. She was begging the world she thought she ruled. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't feel triumph. This wasn't victory. This was gravity functioning correctly. Justice isn't glorious. It's heavy. "As chief, I cannot personally lead prosecution," I told her. "It will go through the system like every other case, fairly." "I'm not a criminal," she whispered. "You crossed the line," I replied. "That makes you one." When they guided her to the car, she didn't fight, not physically. Only with a final desperate sentence, "This neighborhood needed me." I looked around. Strollers, mailboxes, porch plants, morning sunlight. Peaceful, quiet. Not because of her rules, but because fear had lifted. "No," I said, "it needed freedom from you." The cruiser door closed, soft, final. The street exhaled. My wife squeezed my arm. Our son slept. Wind rustled leaves instead of tension. Somewhere a sprinkler clicked on. A dog barked without fear of fines. Balance returned, not by force, but by truth finally being louder than intimidation. Karen wasn't driven away by anger. She was removed by reality. And as the police cars rolled away, I knew one thing with absolute clarity: justice isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It just needs the right moment to arrive. Courtrooms don't roar. They hum. Quiet tension, the weight of truth waiting to land, the kind of silence that feels like the world holding its breath. Months passed since that morning. Months of statements, hearings, paperwork, neighbors finding courage to speak, fear dissolving into testimony. And now everything led here. Karen sat at the defense table, no clipboard, no power posture, no red lipstick of confidence she once wore like armor. Just pale skin, shaking fingers, a blazer that didn't fit confidence anymore. She looked smaller, not physically, spiritually, like someone who realized too late that she mistook control for purpose, authority for respect. The courtroom murmur died when the judge entered. Lawyers stood. Spectators fell silent. Even the air stilled. My wife held our baby close, his small breathing soft against her shoulder. He slept through most of it, blissfully unaware that his existence had once ignited a battle someone else lost. Witnesses spoke, calm, firm, clear. A neighbor who once cowered behind blinds now stood tall, telling the court how Karen patrolled lawns like private territory. Another explained how she threatened fines over harmless sounds, children laughing, a dog's bark, the wind chimes someone once happily hung. It wasn't noise she hated. It was life she couldn't control. Video showed Karen on our porch, eyes wild, posture rigid, weapon visible in her bag, her voice rising like a fever she couldn't escape. Not rage for safety, rage for dominance. She tried to look away, but truth has gravity. It pulls eyes no matter how hard they resist. Then it was my turn. I didn't speak as a father first, or a police chief second. I spoke as someone who believed in order, the real kind, built on law and dignity, not fear and force. I described her threats, her escalation, the moment she crossed the invisible line that protects neighbors from becoming victims. No embellishment, no fury. Just facts spoken like pillars. The defense tried to paint her as overwhelmed, stressed, misunderstood. But even excuses have limits. They crumble when stacked against reality. They collapse when compared with responsibility. Finally, Karen stood to speak. Not the commanding woman who once marched the street with a clipboard, chest high, voice sharp. She looked down, voice thin, shaking. I was overwhelmed, she whispered. I was trying to enforce order. I didn't mean for things to go that far. The judge waited. Her voice wavered more. People didn't listen. I just wanted quiet, control, respect, control. The word hung in the air like dust, heavy, revealing. The honesty came too late. Not the apology for harm, but the confession of motive. Not remorse for what she did, but grief that she lost her imagined throne. The judge didn't scold, didn't lecture. That wasn't his role. His voice was steady, like a scale settling into balance. There is a difference between community standards and personal tyranny, he said. You crossed that line. You attempted to impose power that was never yours to hold. This court finds you guilty. No gasp, no shock. Because truth had been inevitable long before that sentence. The sentence followed. Prison time, mandatory counseling, a restraining order, loss of HOA authority permanently, no fines, no meetings, no laws to twist, no neighbors to intimidate. Her kingdom dissolved, and with it, the illusion she lived inside. When officers approached to escort her out, Karen finally looked up, at me, at my wife, at the baby whose quiet breathing contradicted every fear she ever held about him. Her eyes weren't angry now. They were hollow, like someone staring at a future she never imagined and didn't know how to survive. You ruined me, she murmured. Not loud, not dramatic, just empty. I didn't raise my voice, didn't gloat, didn't look away. No, I said. You ruined yourself. She blinked. A tear escaped, not sorrow, surrender. Then she walked out, escorted by the same system she once believed she could command by shouting. Outside the courthouse, the sky stretched calm and endless. Sunlight glimmered off car roofs. People returned to their lives, whispers fading into footsteps and quiet conversations. My wife rested her head on my shoulder. Our son slept in her arms, peaceful in a world that had chosen to protect him instead of fear him. The neighborhood changed too. Mailboxes got repainted in new colors. Wind chimes returned. Kids laughed loud again, running down sidewalks without glancing over shoulders. The HOA board rewrote rules, not to silence life, but to protect it. Order wasn't lost, it was reclaimed. Real order, the kind that comes from fairness, not fear. Sometimes justice isn't thunder. It's a quiet morning where peace feels earned. Sometimes it isn't a battle. It's a courtroom door closing behind someone who mistook authority for ownership. Sometimes heroes don't roar. They simply stand, steady enough that bullies fall under their own weight. I looked down at my son, his tiny hand curled, his breath soft, unaware that his life had already survived someone else's broken attempt at control. The world isn't perfect, it never will be, but this corner of it learned something, and so did I. Justice isn't loud, it doesn't need applause. Justice arrives steadily, patiently, and when it does, the world breathes again. And for the first time since moving into that street, it finally felt like home.